Very good. How's everyone?
Good.
Good, good. Okay, so what did we talk about last week? Can anyone remember? Those that were here? What did we talk about last week?
I think what were the qualities of the government.
Qualities of the government. Okay, we touched a bit on the qualities of the government, but what else did we talk about last time? What? It's the 6th week we've been talking about the.
So did we just end the Hijrah?
Yeah. So it was the 6th week that we talked about the Hijrah. So how did we sum up the Hijrah? What did we talk about last week?
Or just lessons for now?
Yeah, so we talked about the lessons of the Hijrah, and then we brought in some of the aspects of setting up a new society and a new government and state. Okay, can anyone remember any of the lessons from last time that we covered? Zane? No? Anything? Okay, so we did quite a lot. Okay, so we talked about how we talked about what the definition of a hijrah is, the different types of hijrah, moving from one place to another. We talked about the benefits of the hijrah. We talked about the actual lessons from the actual preparing for the hijrah, the lessons that we learned from the actual physical journey. We talked about the role of women in the hijrah, talked about the position and status of Abu Bakr in the hijrah. We explored a lot of the ideas around tawakkul Allah and trusting in Allah, and how we tie our camel and put our trust in Allah. And then the famous hadith, what's the very first hadith that we did in Nawawi's 40 hadith? Remember a few years ago when we studied Nawawi's 40 hadith, probably 5-6 years ago. What was the very first one? And it was linked to the hijrah.
Every action is judged by its intention.
That's right. So every action that we do is judged according to its intention. Okay. So so we talked about all of those elements. Any questions from any of that we did last time? From the lessons or anything related to that? Any questions? Everyone happy with that? Okay, good. So then we talked about what was the first major thing that the Prophet ﷺ did when he arrived in Medina. What's the first big thing that he did? Build the Masjid. Okay, and we talked about the story of how they chose where the Masjid should be. So we talked about how camel was left alone, and then it settled in the middle of the city, and Prophet said, this is where we're going to build the Masjid. He bought the land off the 2 orphans that owned it. They relocated some of the graves that were there, and then he started building the Masjid. What did he do? What day was it when he entered Medina? Which day of the week was it?
Sunday.
It was a Friday, because
Because he led Jumu'ah onward.
That's right. So he left the mosque in Quba, was heading towards Medina, and then it was time for Jummah. So then he led the first congregation of Jummah, and then we know the story about him entering into Medina. Everyone was happy, singing and dancing, and then the camel went. Whose house did he stay in when he was in Medina? What was the name of the...
Abu Ansari?
Abu Ayyub. Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, that's right. Who gave him his first meal or gift in Medina? Anyone know? We didn't talk about this last week, but it's one of those trivia questions. So Zayd bin Thabit says that the very first night that the day the Prophet was there, he was the very first person to bring the Prophet some food, and, and it was like a sort of a dish with bread and other stuff in, and he presented that to the Prophet and that was his first meal in Abu Ayyub's house. And then not a day would go by without one or other person bringing different gifts from Prophet ﷺ. And we talked about how Prophet ﷺ, how he started off living on the bottom floor in Abu Ayyub's house, and then Abu Ayyub a few weeks later insisted that they swap over, and that Prophet ﷺ then would sleep in the room upstairs. Okay, so we touched on all of those. So in terms of building the mosque, how did they? What was the mosque? How did the mosque look like when the Prophet ﷺ built it? What was the structure of the mosque? What did it look like?
Just 4 walls and a roof, like a thatch roof, and very simple.
Very simple, yeah. So it was 4 walls, I think about 300 square meters or something. So not huge. And it had, we talked about, it had 3 doors, 3 entrances. So, I mean, 3 public entrances. Okay. Can you remember the names of any of the entrances? So the Masjid is facing north, because it's facing, the Qibla is Jerusalem. Okay. And then at the front of the mosque, at the front, it's got some roof covering, and the roof covering is made out of palm leaves. So they'd have they covered it with palm leaves and kept it up. And then there were 3 doors. The door on the south, facing Makkah, was known as Bab al-Wat. There's Bab al-Rahman. So the door of mercy, and that was facing south. Facing on the east was the gate of the women, Bab al-Nisa. And on the west was the other one, Baba. Huh? You're nearly there. Jibreel, well done. So the gate of Jibreel. Okay. How did they actually build it? What was it made from? What were the walls made out of?
Stones and hardened sand.
Stones or hardened sand. Okay. What else could it be made out of? Later on it was made from stone, but the very first one wasn't made out of stone. It was made out of mud bricks. Okay. And there was a builder from the Najd area inside Medina, who was a Muslim. He would the Prophet ﷺ asked him, because he was a builder, to actually make the mud bricks. And again, the way you make, have any of you made mud bricks before? No? Okay. So again, you moisten the mud, mix it to a certain consistency, and then you leave it out for it to bake and to become hardened. Okay. And so that's a special process. So there was a particular person who was an architect. So the Prophet ﷺ, or he was a builder. So the Prophet ﷺ asked him to do that. So he was making the bricks. Then the Prophet ﷺ, then he asked the Prophet ﷺ, everyone is carrying bricks. everyone is carrying bricks. Can I not help you carry the brick? Because he felt a bit left out. Prophet says, no, you do what you're good at, and what you're good at is actually what? Making the bricks, making the mixture, making the bricks and helping to form that. So again, there was we'll come back onto this issue of specialization in a second. Also, they when you're sort of doing sort of a very laborious task in very hot weather and there's lots of people, what are some of the ways in which you can break up the monotony of the task? Because it's quite boring just carrying bricks and then building it. What are some of the ways in which those things can get sort of more light-hearted? Songs, yeah. So by chanting or songs or music. So basically, one of the people there was a poet. So he was he wrote some lines of poetry, and it was basically it's motivational. And what he said was, if we sit down while the Messenger of Allah is working, that is a misguided act on our behalf. Okay. So again, it's just a way in which to encourage people to get involved. And again, it shows the Prophet ﷺ, he's leading from the front. He's there, he's carrying the bricks, he's placing the bricks and building the masjid. So that's, and so the task is, isn't it, essentially shame on us if the Prophet ﷺ is, doing all the work and we're not doing the work. And again, and we'll come back on to those aspects of leadership in a second. There's another famous story during the building of the mosque. So, can anyone remember, this is going back a couple of years almost now, who was the very first person to be killed for the sake of Islam in Makkah? Does anyone know who was? And the sort of the English word for that is martyr. Who was the first martyr in Islam? Anyone remember that story?
Was it Yasser?
Yasser was the second martyr. So he was the first male martyr. Who was the first female martyr?
His wife, I think.
His wife?
Sumayya.
That's right. So Sumayya was the first martyr. So Sumayya and Yasser, they were both killed because they were tortured to death, essentially. And they had a son. The son's name is, anyone know? Very famous Sahabi. It was the son of Yasser. No?
Something bin Yasser.
You're right, yeah. Something bin Yasser. Excellent. Well done. So it's Amir bin Yasser. So Amir, the son of Yasser. So anyway, so he's carrying these bricks, and and he's having a joke with the Prophet ﷺ. Again, so you can joke, and he's sort of saying, "Oh, these guys, they're giving me 2 bricks, and they're just carrying the 1 brick, and they're trying to kill me by giving me 2 bricks at a time." So what did the Prophet ﷺ say to him? He knew it was a joke, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, what did he say? Probably don't know, but as I say, he said that don't worry, they're not trying to kill you, but this is one of his prophecies: you will be killed by the people who have transgressed the bounds. Okay, so he's predicting his death, saying actually Yasser, or he didn't call him Yasser, he said, "O son of Sumayya." Okay, so his title was not Amir bin Yasser, which is his proper kunya. It was actually, he called him son of Sumayya to give Sumayya, his mother, sort of high respect and regard because she was the first martyr. So he said, "Oh, son of Sumayyah, you know they're not trying to kill you. Don't just chill out a bit. You will actually be killed by the people who have transgressed the bounds, and your last drink will be." Do you know what his last drink would be? Again, the prophecy did come true.
Poison?
No, that's a really good guess actually. No, it's not poison. Your last drink will be a cup of milk. Okay? And so, and then obviously, Amr told that to people and it becomes sort of folklore after that because the Prophet predicted that. And then he goes on to sort of, after sort of giving that bit of news, that Allah had obviously allowed the Prophet to be given that information. He then went on to sort of calm it down a little bit by saying, "Don't worry, you get double the reward of everyone else for carrying 2 bricks." Okay, so again, and then we'll come on to sort of the way the Prophet communicates these things to his followers. And again, when we talked in the halaqah about the importance of communication, you can see how the Prophet he's using these techniques to get across information. So he's got Amr's attention by saying things which can be quite serious or unexpected, and then he's giving uplifting him towards the end. So anyway, and if we fast forward to when Amr died, the famous battle between Ali and Muawiyah, Amr bin Yasir, he was on which side? Was he on the side of Muawiyah or was he on the side of Ali? And obviously this hadith is used by the people as sort of confirmation of who's on the right path. Ali, yeah. So Amr, he was actually fighting on the side of Ali, and in the battle, he had a cup of milk, went into battle, and then he died in that battle. So again, what the Prophet he said was that he would be killed by the people who had transgressed the bounds. Again, that's another topic. We'll come back onto that much later on, inshallah. But again, that was one of the prophecies, and this was done at the time of the building of the mosque in Medina. Okay, so any questions around the actual building of the mosque? Anyway, it was a very plain mosque. As I say, it took a few quite a few days, a couple of weeks to build. Some say. And once the mosque was built, as I say, it was just mud bricks, a few palm leaves at the front facing Jerusalem, and that was it. It wasn't sort of, when it would rain, the rain would come through the roof. Okay, and there are lots of hadith about when it would rain, then the ground, because it was sand and mud, it would actually be muddy, and then at one time. A famous hadith, because it's a fiqh issue, is that when it was raining, Prophet ﷺ, he would make sajda, and when he came up, he had, mud on his forehead. Again, so, it shows that you're allowed to pray outside, pray on the mud, all that type of things. So it's a very simple structure, very plain, 4 walls, wasn't decorated, it didn't have any of the other adornments that we see of Masjid now. But it was the most blessed masjid, because why was it the most blessed masjid after the Kaaba? Why was it so blessed? And Prophet he even said, "My masjid has blessings. If you pray in my masjid, one prayer counts equivalent to how many other prayers in another mosque?"
5,000.
Huh?
5,000.
5,000, not quite 5,000.
4 years.
Well, not quite 4 years. Depends how often you pray.
700.
Not quite. Between 700 and 5,000. 1,000. Okay. So praying in Masjid al-Nabi, right? It is equivalent, or you get the same blessings as praying 1,000 prayers in any other mosque. Okay. So again, if you do get the opportunity, if you are invited there, then it is important to pray as many prayers as you can there. And we talked before, Masjid al-Nabi, it's 1,000. What is praying in the Haram, in Makkah, near the Kaaba, how much is that?
7,000.
7,000 is a good guess. 10,000 is a closer guess. We do this every few weeks, guys. I can't believe how you don't remember these things. You don't even make notes. Come on. 100,000. Yeah. So so praying in beside the Kaaba, time of prayer, that's 100,000 times the prayer, the blessings you get praying anywhere else. Okay. And Prophet says there are only 3 mosques you should go to with intention of praying, as in to visit, to pray. Those 3 mosques are obviously. Yep. So there's the Kaaba. There's. Sorry.
Masjid al-Nabi.
Yeah, the Prophet's Masjid, and the third one is.
Is it the one in Palestine?
The one in Palestine, Masjid al-Aqsa. So these are the 3 that you should make the intention to go and visit and pray in. Okay, so what? Some of the lessons from building the mosque. We talked about a couple of those already. That Allah says in translation. And they are those who, if we give them authority in the land, they establish prayer, and that's from Surah Al-Hajj. So the very first thing the Prophet ﷺ did was to build a mosque, okay? And he did that even before he built his own house, okay? Only after he finished the mosque did he then build his own house next to that, okay? So, and again, within a space of a week, the Prophet ﷺ, he's basically built 2 mosques, or started building 2 mosques, and sort of laid the place for the 3rd mosque as well. Okay, well, what are these 3 mosques within the space of a week when he got to Medina? Masjid al-Quba, right? Second one is his own mosque, yeah, Masjid al-Nabi. What's the 3rd one that became a mosque later on? Where he prayed Jummah. Yeah, so they made that place into a mosque as well. Okay? So again, it shows the importance of prayer, importance of the masjid, which we'll come on to in a second. And again, the Prophet ﷺ, one of the other things is, and we'll talk, touch upon these in the halaqah later on, is the Prophet ﷺ demonstrating his leadership. Okay, so he's not just sort of sitting somewhere in a sort of a tent under the shade and directing people to do what he's actually part of the people going out, making the bricks, carrying the bricks, laying the bricks. Okay, and again, if we want to demonstrate effective leadership, right, we need to be in that situation where people see you, who practicing what you preach, right? And you're there breaking down the barriers between yourself as a leader or a chief and the people that you're working with. Okay, so it's not trying to bring in what we call a hierarchy. Right? I'm the chief, I'm the boss, no one talks to me except. It's actually being a person of the people, so you're accessible to people. And then we've got stories of how the Prophet ﷺ, he would be approached by people, they'd ask him questions. Okay. Like, the incident with Amr bin Yasir. So again, it shows that he's getting involved, demonstrating aspects of leadership. And we'll touch upon those later on. Also, it shows another aspect of leadership, which is around specialization. So as a leader, you need to know the qualities of the people you're working with. You need to know the gifts or the things that people have. I mean, any of you guys watch The Apprentice whenever it comes on? I know it's not on at the moment. You watch it? Yeah? Okay. You watch it? Yeah? I know you watch it. Okay. And so when you have The Apprentice, ideally you have the project manager. Okay. What should be the first thing the project manager does when they're given a task?
Elect a sub-team manager.
Well, they can, you don't necessarily need to have, but you have a sub-team manager. So how do they choose a sub-team manager? They flick a coin.
Decides he should be by basing them on the qualities of the
Yeah.
leader.
So a good leader, and you see it when you watch The Apprentice, there are good leaders and bad leaders. A good leader knows the qualities that different people have in their team, and he's able to then delegate the right task to the right person so the team functions well. If you give the important task to the wrong person, the task's not going to get done so well. Okay? So that's why it's important to know your team, know the people you're dealing with. Okay? And the Prophet, he knew that. So there's this builder, he knew he was a builder, and he told him, don't carry the bricks, you just concern yourself with making the bricks. Right? That's your specialist interest, that's your expertise. Just keep to that expertise, and that's what he did. So again, it's not important, and we talked about this in Halakha on Friday. It's not important that everyone does public speaking, that everyone is a da'i. What's important is that you recognise your own gifts and your own talents and the talents of others, and then you work according to that. So so the Prophet, he's there and he's demonstrating how to lead a team, how to get the best out of people and assign different people different tasks. Okay? So, any questions on that? Okay?
So, let me wait.
Yes?
How long did the full project take, construction of the mosque?
Well, we're not entirely sure. There's a lot that we don't know about those early times. Some say it took maybe 5 or 6 months, because he didn't start work on his own house until about 5-6 months later. And then once the mosque was complete, then he built his 2 living quarters. And where were his living quarters? Where were?
Next to the mosque.
They were adjoining the mosque. Okay? So again, if people have done extensions, they know what a party wall is. You know what a party wall is? Party wall. Huh?
Wall that you share with your neighbour.
It's a shared wall. So in those days, walls were a commodity. Okay, and so so once they built the wall of the mosque, people then built alongside them, because they've already got one fortified wall, so they'd build their house adjoining that. So the Prophet's house, he had 2 wives at the time. Who were his wives at the time? Aisha, yes, she was the second of his wife.
Asma.
Huh?
Asma.
No, not Asma.
Sauda.
Sauda, okay. So it was Sauda and then Aisha. So they built their houses adjoining the mosque, and again with that, Prophet he'd have his own private door. So we said there were 3 doors of the mosque. There's Babu Nisa, Babu Rahma, Babu Jibril, okay, and then different people who built alongside the side of the mosque, right? They have their own private entrance to the mosque, okay. And we know of that because when inshallah we'll do the final days of the Prophet ﷺ, there are lots of stories about how he would in his final illness how you look into the mosque, okay, and they wouldn't have a physical door, they would just have a covering, okay, and other Sahabi, they built their houses adjoining the mosque. And then later on, I can't remember if it was at the time of Abu Bakr or towards the end of the Prophet's life, where they asked that everyone else's doors were blocked off, apart from his own doors. Okay. So and so everyone needed to come through the main entrances, the 3 main entrances. Okay. So so answer to your question is he didn't start work on his own house until they say about 4 or 5 months later. Even again, we don't even know when the prayers were changed, because we know when were in Makkah before the night journey. Okay, Asra Miraj. How often did the Muslims pray? Twice a day, right? Did they have to pray twice a day, or was it recommended to pray twice a day? Recommended? Huh? Voluntary? We don't actually know. Okay, we don't know if it was compulsory that they had to pray twice a day, or it was voluntary. So there's again, for something as important as that, we just don't have the quality of information from them. But we have a famous hadith where Aisha says that when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, then the prayers were established as we know them. So between Al-Isra wal Miraj, when the 5 daily prayers were, well, the 50 down to 5, right? Each of the 5 prayers we had to pray were only consisted of 2 rak'ah, right? So Fajr was 2, Dhuhr was 2, Asr was 2, Maghrib was 2, Isha was 2. And then sometime between Al-Isra wal Miraj, where the 5 came down, and when they set up the mosque in Medina, it changed to as we know them. And so Aisha says that when we came to Medina, then we prayed as you know we pray. And she's narrating it much later on, and everyone knows how they pray. So again, some of these are really important details from a historical perspective. We just don't know, right? But so there's a lot we don't know. But again, a few months. It says it probably took for the whole thing to be made. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Just wanted to talk about a couple of a few lessons from the building of the mosque. One is obviously this was the very first thing that the Prophet ﷺ did when he went to Quba, built a mosque. Went to Medina, he built a mosque. What does that show us? The importance of mosque and obviously prayer as the place for praying. And we talked about this before. What does the word masjid mean?
Does the ma mean that it gives a place and sajid is the action? Okay?
Yeah. So the thing which is most representative of the prayer or unique about our prayer is the sajda, and the sajda is what? Prostration, where you put your head on the ground. So the highest point of you as a human being, most noble part of you, which is your face, you put on the lowest point, which is the ground, to show your relationship to Allah. So that is the uniqueness of our prayer. Okay, so again, in places in the Quran where it talks about sajda, it's another word for basically saying prayer. So the place of doing sajda is the masjid. Okay, so yeah, well done. So the importance of the masjid, but the greatness of the first mosque was not the actual physical building. What gave it its sort of uniqueness, its gravity, its importance? What was more important than the actual bricks and mortar?
And the personality of the Prophet.
Yeah, the people. Okay, so it's not just the physical environment which is important. What is more important is the people who interact in that space and what they do. Okay. So it's and Allah talks about not being distracted in Surah Al-Nur in translation. Allah says there are men who neither commerce nor sale distracts them from the remembrance of Allah and the performance of prayer and giving zakah. They fear a day in which their hearts and eyes will fearfully turn about. And then again earlier on in the same surah, such niches are in mosques which Allah has ordered to be raised, and that His name be mentioned therein, exalting Him within them in the morning and in the evenings. Okay, so again, Allah says that the important thing is people who go to the mosque and they're not distracted by things. Yes, it's fine when we're outside the mosque, we're concerned about our daily life, our schools, our jobs, our social interactions, but when you're inside the mosque, it's around getting that focus for why you're there, for salah, for dhikr, okay? And these are the better people, okay? So it's about imbuing a different spirit within the mosque, So the mosque is obviously, it's a physical building, but it's mainly for where people gather. One of the other lessons and roles of the mosque is it's the centre of learning. It's where education happens. Okay? Where did education happen in the Prophet's life in Makkah?
In his friend's house.
In his friend's house. What was the name of his friend? Anyone remember? The house of Arqam. Well done. Darul Arqam. Okay? So they used to gather in the house of Arqam like this, in a circle, to do halaqah, where the Prophet would teach them. Now that they've established Islam in Medina, they don't need a private house or a secret meeting place. They can do it publicly, and what better place than to do it in the mosque? So the mosque was the centre of learning. It's where the schools were, it's where the universities were, it's where all the education happened, right? And all the education is focused around what's the main fulcrum of education? What's the main pivot of education? A bit more, you're right, religion, but what specific thing about religion?
Islam history.
Sort of, yeah, but more than that. So all the education was.
Quran.
It was, well, that was part of the education, but the purpose of the education was what? So yes, they did Quran, they did some of the sciences, they did some of the other learning, but what was the purpose of the learning in the mosque?
To teach it to the next generation.
And also teaching it, but it was to focus on your relationship with Allah, to have a closer relationship with Allah. That is the point of education, and in an Islamic system, that is why we educate people, so they have a closer relationship with Allah. And you see that in the sort of golden generation of Islam, where science flourished. There's never been a conflict in Islam between science and Islam, because the purpose of scientific inquiry for the early Muslims was what? You would do your scientific inquiry in order to glorify Allah, right? And therefore to get closer to Allah. Okay? A lot of the educational endeavour in society now is focused around what? Not quite yourself, linked to that. So in this society we live in, what is educational endeavour focused around?
Our world.
Yeah, sort of.
Wealth creation.
Wealth creation, okay? So here we're living in a society which we call capitalist, where money or capital is important. Therefore, even the education system is focused around generating money, generating wealth. right? In an Islamic system, the purpose of education is not around generating wealth, it's around generating a closeness to Allah, which can then generate wealth or other things. So the focus is different, and so the way people learn, the way they study, the outputs from that are very different. So again, these things are quite important. So the early Islam was around learning these things to get close to Allah, to glorify Allah, have a better relationship with Allah, and then Allah will bless you with all these other things. Okay. So again, so it's a physical building, but the people are important. Learning and education happened in the masjid. And again, if we look at our masajid now, it's not a place where learning tends to happen in the majority of our mosques, certainly in this country. Right? They've lost that. Okay? And if the only learning that tends to happen is just learning a very narrow part of Islam, okay, which is the Quran, and maybe the Hadith, okay? But beyond that, there's no other education about anything else, or very little. There are a few mosques which are exceptions, and that's good on them. But for the majority of mosques, they've lost that. Okay? Allah also, the Prophet ﷺ said that when people gather in order to learn in a mosque, okay, 4 things happen. So whenever people are sitting down and learning about Islam, 4 things happen. What are these 4 things? We've talked about them before.
Angels enter the area.
Angels enter the area. That's the 3rd thing. Yep. So angels surround the gathering. Okay. So if you want angels to be around, then you have halaqah, you have study circles, you learn about Islam. Angels will come and they will gather. Okay? What are the other things that happen then? So angels will gather. What's the other 3 things? Allah will provide sakina. What is sakina?
The peace in the heart.
Peace in the heart, tranquility, right? So when people gather to praise Allah for the sake of Allah, Allah provides sakina, tranquility on the people. He provides rahmah. What is rahmah? Mercy. Yeah. Angels come and they surround the gathering. And the 4th thing is, and Allah will mention the gathering in a company much better than this. Right? So Allah will mention this gathering to people or to entities around Allah. And if Allah's mentioning the gathering, well, what more can you want? Yeah? So these 4 things happen when people gather to learn about Islam.
What about nowadays when things are changing, people are having webinars or television or recorded teachings that I've seen and I've learned a lot from them, and they're fantastic. So it's the same 4 benefits apply on those gatherings or those
They'll apply
viewings
they'll apply on the gatherings where the learning is happening if there are people there. But if you're sort of dialing into it, you're not part of the gathering of learning, because the hadith is around when people have gathered to learn. So, but you will still gain benefit of the learning, and Allah will still give you blessings and benefit of that learning and intention.
But if the telecast at some point people gathered, they gather, but they're gathering in different parts of the world.
All right, I see what you're saying. So if it's a live telecast,
yeah.
then again, I'm not a sheikh. I can't answer that. Maybe I'll ask someone to see what it is. But from what we know is that if there is a gathering where the learning is happening, then angels surround that gathering. You may be able to then infer, well, if part of that gathering is people linked remotely, then maybe they are part of that learning. Allah knows best, but I don't know, I'd have to ask someone more qualified. But it's a really good question. Okay. That's another benefit of a role of a mosque. Again, one of the roles of the mosque is it's a meeting place. It's a place of socialization. Again, I've been to many mosques where they don't allow you to talk about anything. Right? They tell you off if you're just sort of chatting to your friends. But actually, one of the critical functions of a mosque is a place to gather, is a socialization area. We go there, or ideally we should go there 5 times a day. You meet the people. That strengthens the bond of brotherhood. You know, much like, if we didn't have these regular halaqah or study circles, how often would we see each other? And the fact that we gather together, that strengthens the bond through Islam for the sake of Allah. So there is that benefit of actually going regularly to the mosque, seeing the people, and getting close to them. And Allah blesses that gathering and puts the love in the hearts of people who are in that situation. So again, that's a benefit. And again, and again with Jummah and all the other prayers, there is an importance on that, and we'll talk about that inshallah next time when we talk about brotherhood, which was one of the next things that was done. The mosque and the time of Prophet ﷺ was also a place where the poor and the travellers could stay. Okay, they didn't need to go to any refuge shelters, any homelessness places. Travellers or new people that would come knew that they could come and they could stay in the mosque. In fact, there was a whole welfare infrastructure that was created around supporting these people, right? And then later on they had to title some of these people that were living in the mosque. Does anyone know what the name of these people were? Are you putting your hand up, or what was the name of the people? Yeah?
Yes, how the Sufa.
Yeah, El Sufa, the people of the Sufa being the people of the rose. Okay, so originally they were basically, when the Qibla changed, these people, they stayed in the shaded area, which was originally at the front, but now at the back of the mosque. Okay, so that was a place where these people stayed. So the poor and the travellers would stay in the mosque. Again, nowadays most of our masajid, even in the Muslim countries, are locked out of hours. Okay, out of prayer times, they're locked. Okay, so even between the prayer times, they're locked. Right? I went to the oldest university in the world, which is where? Anyone know?
North Africa.
Which part of North Africa?
That's Morocco.
That's right. Do you know the name of the?
Her name was Fatima, I think.
Yeah.
She was in Nathan University.
I can't remember the name. That's why I'm asking. But yeah, in Fez, in Morocco, is the oldest university. It begins with Q. I can't remember the name at the moment. It might come to me. But basically, after Dhuhr, they kicked us all out. You couldn't stay there, and so they locked the doors, and you had to come back at Asr time. Okay, so even our own mosques, they're not open and accessible for us. Okay, and some scholars say one of the conditions of a mosque is that it's always open. I'm not going to get there. It's a difference of opinion around that. The mosque is also the place where the armies started, okay, going to war, the raising of the banner, assigning the generals, all that started in the mosque, okay. The Prophet would gather the generals, would gather the people, he would give instructions in the mosque, and they would start from the mosque and then they would move from there. So again, a critical role in society there. It was a place of dawah. We know the stories of the Christians of Najran who came later on. They were non-Muslims and they stayed in the mosque. And even nowadays you have some people who think that it's not allowed for non-Muslims to go to the mosque. I don't know, have you come across these people?
No, thankfully no.
Huh?
Thankfully no.
I've come across them where they certainly half a generation ago they would not allow non-Muslims into the mosque. Nowadays, I think all mosques have to in terms of the funding and stuff like that. But there was a time where they didn't allow non-Muslims in the mosque. Okay, but if you look at the life of the Prophet, the Christians of Najran, they came and they stayed in the mosque. Okay, so it's a place of dawah for the mosques. It's the main place of consultation, okay, where the leader consults with the people, the experts or the general population. And there's a special word in Arabic for that. Does anyone?
Shura?
Shura, that's right. So it's a place of Shura. And Prophet ﷺ, he would gather the people when he'd want to consult with them, do Shura. Abu Bakr, he would gather the people in the mosque to do consultation. Right? Umar ibn al-Khattab, he would gather the people in the mosque. So the mosque, it literally was the heart of the community. And it's a shame that a lot of our masajid, they don't see the mosque as being the heart of the community and as a gift and benefit for all of the community. Okay? Also, celebrations would happen in the mosque. What would happen in the mosque? Huh?
Eid.
Eid, okay. Also, you're right, yeah. They do the Eid prayer and iftars, yes, excellent. Yes, what else? Well, the celebrations.
Nikah.
Nikah, right? Weddings, right? So again, literally, the mosque was the center of the society, right? It was the hub. It was where everything happened. Okay? So then it shows the importance of the mosque. So, any questions on that? I'll roughly finish there.
I think you're generalising what happened in mosques so many decades ago, because mosques are everywhere in the world, and yes, perhaps certain cultures and certain societies, or perhaps a culture that we belong to, but you cannot generalise that all the mosques everywhere, don't have anything like that, or never used to have anything.
No, I'm from my personal experience, certainly in this country,
Yeah.
places that I've been to, right, apart from Makkah and Medina, and talking to people who are from different parts of the world, right?
In my childhood, I can't remember the mosques were closed, or the non-Muslim were not allowed, or.
I think you're obviously a lot more experienced than I am. You're slightly senior to me.
Very polite way of saying it.
I think there's problems. That's why things have changed the way they're responsive. I think the reason they lock mosques in some countries is because bad people would do talks in mosques. There were congregational people who didn't have the best. That's why they have to lock them, because then the mosque will get in trouble.
Yeah. I'm not.
In all countries, it's not.
I completely accept that. I'm not. It's not a criticism per se. What I'm trying to say is, when the first mosque was created, and the role of the mosque, it should be for all of us, and the fact that we have these situations, it should be it's sort of an indictment on all of us. It's not a criticism of the mosque committees. It's a criticism of us as members of the community who don't respect the mosque as much as it should be, and we don't call for the fact that the mosque should be the hub of our lives, right? So it's not having a go at people. It's basically saying this is where we should be aiming at, and if we want to create a dynamic society for Muslims, we should see the mosque as having a different role and function. And the problem is, nowadays we've secularized our relationship with the mosque. We go to pray, we'll go for talks, but we don't see it as being the hub of the community. And that's what I'm saying is, at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the dynamism came from the fact that it fulfilled a lot of these functions. So it's just highlighting that. And I accept, in this day and age, we're not going to get there just yet. But it's something that we should be aware of,
And also, just to point on Muslims, mosques not allowing non-Muslims. I think the earlier generation that came, they would have they would have seen the end of the British Empire, or they would have experienced a different Britain than we had. Like the racism, this is like one of the places where they got away from that. And I think it's not because of religious reasons. I think it's probably a response to the environment or history and what had gone on. I don't think they.
No, I accept it. But I mean, the mosque in Fez, the oldest university, that wouldn't allow non-Muslims in.
But Morocco's.
But what I'm saying is, I accept what you're saying. But I'm just saying that that, it's not a generalization for everything. But there are, it's just some people have that attitude and opinion. What I'm saying is that if we look at the life of Prophet ﷺ, we should focus on how he did things.
Talking about that point, Morocco is a French colony. The French, when they ruled North Africa, I know you know this, they didn't allow, the French government didn't want non-Muslims going to the mosques because they were worried a lot of them would become Muslim. I don't know if the mosque in Morocco has that reasoning, but the French, when they ruled North Africa, they didn't allow their own citizens to go to the mosques because they were worried about.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I accept that. Any other questions or comments?
You spoke about good deeds in mosques and the fact that they're accentuated. What about bad deeds? If you were to do a bad deed outside the mosque, say such as lie or slander, and then you perform a bad deed in the mosque, so are the sins for bad deeds done in the mosque higher,
Yes.
greater?
Yeah, the scholars have said they are, because the mosque is a place of purity. It is the house of Allah, and
You're
like you said,
desecrating the mosque in a way.
yeah, you are. And so likewise, the benefits that you get from doing good things in the mosque are multiplied, and also if you don't respect it, then if you do purposefully bad things, then yes, there are hadith that talk about how those things are more severe in the sight of Allah. Okay, one final point to finish off with, again, about the Prophet ﷺ's mosque. I know it's been expanded lots of times, but there is something that's really unique and special around the Prophet ﷺ's mosque, right, that he built, that he said that this was a really precious gift to the Ummah, right, about a particular place within the Prophet ﷺ's mosque. Does anyone know what special place there is within the Prophet's Masjid in Medina? Yeah. So Riyadh al-Salihin, al-Rawda, okay? The Prophet said the place between his house and his pulpit where he would give the khutbah, right? The place between his house, and we know the wall of his house is essentially where he's buried now, because he died in the house of Aisha, and then he just lived there. So that it was the original wall of the house to the pulpit. That is a fragment of paradise. Okay, the Roda. So that area, it's as if you're praying in Jannah, and it's serviced in a different dimension by the Al-Kawthar, which is one of the rivers from Jannah. Again, this is a different dimension. We accept what the Prophet says, that area is a very blessed area. So if you do get the opportunity to go to the Prophet's mosque, obviously, you need to pray there, give your salam to the Prophet, but do try and pray in that special area, because as I say, the Prophet said that is a very special area, and it is a piece of the Garden of Paradise. Okay. Any other questions? No. Okay. So I'll finish there. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر